belief is a big part of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Believing that it's possible, believing that you can have a different experience than what you're currently having, regardless of what your circumstances may be telling you. And again, I don't say that to minimize anybody's circumstances, because I know there are people dealing with a lot of heavy things and a lot of painful things.
Mm-hmm.
But I would still say we need fun.
Absolutely.
Because fun brings levity. Fun brings a place of relief. Fun brings a place of enjoyment. And a life void of fun is just very dark and very bleak. And so identify small ways, right? Like we're talking about. Go down a different road, listen to some music, doodle, right?
Yes.
Draw. Do some things that are just for you in the midst of this. Like practice some self-care in the midst of fun.
Today's guest is Mike Brennan, author of Make Fun a Habit, the creative playbook for making life and work fun again. Isn't your typical creative consultant and communicator. He's a passionate advocate for reigniting the lost art of fun and creativity. Mike's expertise go beyond the pages of his books. He helps renowned clients like Heineken, the Chase Bank, infuse creativity, innovation, and fun into their work. His art graces prestigious spaces like the Ronald McDonald House and the IDEA Museum in Mesa, Arizona. What sets Mike apart is his commitment to helping individuals and organizations harness the transformative power of creativity with a unique daily creative process honed over a decade. He empowers people to seamlessly integrate innovation into their routines, making life and work more vibrant and fulfilling through his words, art, action, and unwavering direction to the cause. Mike inspires us all to make fun not just a habit, but a way of life. Well, Mike, welcome. After reading that out, I am so excited for this conversation.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here today, Anita.
After I have said that, what is one of the most courageous things that you have done?
Courageous. It's funny. In the moment, you typically aren't thinking in those terms, right? Like, this is something that's requiring me to be courageous. I think a lot of times you're just kind of faced with, do I do something? Do I not? Like, where do I go? But I think in terms of looking back, not just of a certain event or a certain thing that I've created, but I think really it's developing a sense of curiosity and of continued leaning in to explore, because I wasn't always like that. There was a time in my life when it was, I was the good worker bee, right? I was the person who I do a great job, but just tell me what to do. And so it took a long time for me to break out of that kind of mindset, take some more ownership and agency over myself to go, what is it that I really want? Like, what am I really curious about? What am I interested in? And I think really when you start to open up that part of you, I think that's a courageous thing, because you don't know where that's going to lead. That's the very nature of curiosity, is following it and going like, something's unfolding here. This is exciting. Maybe it's terrifying. Maybe it's all the things. You know that something's happening and you show up for it.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I'm all for curiosity. So what took you on a journey of harnessing the transformative power of creativity?
Well, my creativity started as a kid, right? Like many artists and creative people, I was drawing and painting and making all sorts of art. And my earliest memories are of creating greeting cards for family members. And I would, do this based on cartoon characters that were part of my world back then, right? And I'd give it to my parents, or whoever it was for, and they'd be like, wow, you did this for me? And their face would light up, they'd smile, and they'd, of course, hang it up on the refrigerator. And in that moment, like, I didn't know it, obviously, at 6 years old. But looking back, I realized something was happening, and I paid attention. There was an exchange. Like, I could actually create something, give it to somebody else, and see them impacted in some way, even if it's just a smile, and know, wow, I can take part in that. I want
Mm-hmm.
to do more of that. How do I do more of that? So that's what started me on my path of creativity, was really that type of experience. And for me, creativity is not just making the thing, but it's also connecting with somebody and getting them, like seeing them interact with what I've created, knowing that what I've created has some kind of impact on somebody else. And I think identifying that made a lot of difference for me in my creativity, because there were moments where I was creating things and I didn't get to experience the end user, so to speak, right? The person who was interacting with my what I created, and it didn't feel complete.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting, as I follow it along on my journey, I had to unpack these things. I had to get curious about these things, right? I had to ask myself, why isn't this working? Why is this experience not as fulfilling as something else that maybe I had in the past, or something I hope to be? It certainly was a lot of that. I had the conversation with parents, that all kids who want to go to art school dread, which is that very conversation of, I want to go to art school, right? And so my parents were like, are you sure you don't want to be a doctor? You don't want to be a lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
something that makes money, right? And I understood their concerns, right? They didn't want to be the quote starving artist. I was very passionate about it, and I said,
Mm-hmm.
no, this is actually what I want to do. So we kind of reached a happy medium of graphic design, because it had a commercial end of it, where I could be hired by certain companies, and they knew, okay, you could at least make money at that. So went into graphic design. I still do that today, but now for myself, my own practice, and worked at several different places throughout the years. But eventually what happened is, like, there was a disconnect, and that disconnect really started me asking questions about myself, about
Mm-hmm.
creativity, about what's possible, what do I want. You find that you end up taking on a lot of roles and things that people hand you, other people's dreams that you're kind of living out. And then you can
Mm-hmm.
wake up one day and go, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, or this isn't what I want it to be. And what do I do about that? And so a lot of internal reflection and examination, that's really been a big part of my creativity as well.
So, what significant events in your life have impacted your creativity journey? I know you spoke about early on what actually created it in the first place is seeing that joy, and who wouldn't want to give that to someone and be a part of that? And I love the
Right.
fact that you said connecting. I'm all
Hmm.
for that, connecting with the people. What was the turning point when you actually realized, yeah?
Yeah. Being in graphic design and
Mm-hmm.
being employed full time for my creativity was something that, it certainly was my goal, if you will, to be employed, right? And be able to
Mm-hmm.
use my creative gifts. But I didn't really define it beyond that. And so when I kind of hit a wall, I burned out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at a place where there was a deadline every 2 weeks. And so I'm cranking out this work. I'm not really getting a
Mm-hmm.
chance to enjoy it. And I'm moving on to the next thing. And I'm like, I feel like a machine. Like, this isn't connecting with me as a creator anymore. But I'm not really sure what to do with it. And I ended up leaving my creativity on a shelf for about 10 years, right? I left
Oh.
the industry. I just walked away. I was like, this isn't working. We're going to throw everything out and start over. And so I went into a different career. And then that career, I ended up taking on a lot of roles and responsibilities that really weren't in my gifting. And I didn't do anything creative. So by the time 10 years rolled around into that place, I found myself struggling with depression.
Mm.
And at first it was like, I didn't even realize it. People were coming to me and saying, I think you're depressed. And I'm like, what are
Mhm.
you talking about? Like, I'm not on the couch, I'm not like
Yes.
not able to get out of bed. Like, my understanding of what depression looked like was very limited. And it was high functioning, and it
Mhm.
was actually, I was diagnosed with something called dysthymia, which basically is like described as, trying to get through life with a bag of rocks tied around your legs.
Wow.
A lot of sense of like feeling trapped.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize that I needed creativity for myself, not just for my career. When I denied myself of that for 10 years, that really started to take its toll, along with some other life situations. And I found myself at this place where I had to leave this other career because I was getting kind of chewed up from that and suffering from depression and trying to figure things out at the same time had to move, sell a house. My dad was diagnosed with cancer and passed quickly. And it just felt like that season of life where things are being stripped away one by one. And suddenly you're at rock bottom and you're like, how did I get here? Like, this is not how life was supposed to go. And I don't know what to do about getting out of here, nor do I even know if I can. And so I'm sitting kind of in the dirt, if you will, and asking these questions and examining and trying to get a sense of health, right? Seeking some therapy and some other measures of help. And it was in the midst of that this question came to me inside and said, what if you came back to your creativity, not for like money or business or anything else, but just for you? Because at one time, you were able to access joy in creating. And that was the reason. When you were a kid, it just came naturally. It was just something you did because you enjoyed it so much. Can we get back to that place, right? That was the question. And I had to sit with that and say, like, I don't know. I don't know what that would look like. I don't know what's possible. I'm suffering from depression, so my energy is really low and not feeling like I've got my capacity. And so I came across this idea of doing a 365-day art making journey. And it terrified me because I thought to myself, I haven't shown up the past 10 years. How can I show up for the next year every day and do something? But I was like, at this point, what do I have to lose, right? And so I decided to lean into it. And I was making up the rules as I went. I said, I'm going to make sure that I play, make sure that I just try different things because I'm searching, right? I'm looking. And so it wasn't about creating a masterpiece. It wasn't about creating something I could sell. It wasn't about any of that stuff. It was really more about me rediscovering myself. And so all I could manage was maybe 10, 15 minutes a day in the beginning because I'm like, yeah, I don't have the energy. I don't have the ability. And the first drawing that I did, I was sitting in a local Starbucks and I took my sketchbook, blew the dust off of it, right? Had some pens and I'm drawing my coffee cup. And I looked at it after it was done and I was like, oh, this is terrible. Like, this is embarrassing. Like the skill level, the technical ability is not there at all like it once was. And at that moment, that first day, I had to make a choice. And thankfully, I chose to just write day one at the top of this sketchbook and recognize that this was a journey. This wasn't about a product or about a result of that one specific day. I had to remind myself, of course, you're not going to be automatically great and being able to render and do all the things at the capacity you once did because you've been through so much and you've left it on the shelf for 10 years. You need to rediscover it. It's like a muscle. You need to flex it again. You need to get into some exercise. And so that's what led me on that journey for that first year of going, okay, let me show up. Let me do this. I did it, got to the end of the year and then said, well, now what? And I said, I don't think I'm done. So I kept going. The more I kept going, the more I realized, oh, this is what I like to do. This is what I don't like to do. This is the kind of materials that I want to use. I'm experimenting. I'm playing. I'm just creating because it was interesting. And sometimes it led to people saying, hey, can I buy that? And I was like, cool, but that's not the goal. And sometimes it led to some other things where it was like, this is just for me. And that's fine. And over time, what happened is I started to develop a sense of style and voice in more fine art and illustration. And even though I had gone to art school and learned a lot of technical things and learned conceptual thinking and a lot of the things that were design oriented, I had never really poured into myself in this capacity because I had convinced myself when I was younger, because I can't do photorealism as a style, I am not a real artist. I just, for some reason, I accepted that lie. Like, I knew that there are other artists that do other styles, but for me, the benchmark was here and I wasn't measuring up to it. And so I convinced myself I'm not a real artist. I can be a designer. Sure, I can pick colors and fonts and do all that stuff. But in terms of making something beautiful, I don't know. And so because of telling myself that lie, I shut that door. And now this process was opening the door. It was inviting me in to say, look, there are things that you can do. And sometimes like the weirdness and of the proportions and the wonkiness of some things, that's actually part of your style. It's actually something that's charming. And I realized I like messy things. I need to embrace my mess more. So there's splatter marks and things in my work because I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for expression.
Oh,
And when I
love
started
that.
to find that expression, I needed to lean into it even more. And so that led me to also, as I kept going, realizing that there's a process at work.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started to identify what that process was and write it down, I was like, I don't think this is just for me. I think this is for other creative people, and not even just other visual artists. I think
Mm-hmm.
anyone who's creating anything can benefit from this process that I now teach and speak about. And so this whole thing was basically taking a mess and finding the message in the middle of it. And that's why I'm passionate about this today, because I've lived through it, because I know what that's like to wrestle with your creativity. I know what it's like to put it on a shelf and think, maybe one day, or maybe I'm not even sure if I can get back in touch with that, or I don't know what place creativity has in my life. And maybe I flirt with it every once in a while when I have some blocks of time. But other than that, I don't really know. So I love coming alongside people and helping people explore that and
Mm.
identify how to do it with intention and purpose.
Wow, I absolutely love everything you're saying.
Thank you.
Oh, it's so, I mean, creativity, who wouldn't want it?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
what is one strategy to help people who might be stumbling to start their creative process? I think,
Yeah.
we're all there at times in our lives where we just can't get started.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to say, I think everybody is creative.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
I hear people say all the time, probably daily, well, I'm not creative. I can't draw a stick figure. And I'm like, that's not what we're talking about. Right. Creativity is so much bigger than that.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe you're not artistic, right?
Hmm.
Which is fine, because not everybody has the skills for that, or not everybody's poured into learning those skills, because I think those are acquired skills with practice. Um, but realizing like, no, everyone is creative. It just shows up in a different way. And then figure out how that actually shows up. And again, do that with an intention and purpose. Those are conversations I love to be a part of. But, going back to how can somebody get started with this, really,
Hmm.
that came out of my process as well, because I was thinking to myself, I want to engage with my creativity. I'm suffering from depression. It's been so long. There is no momentum. How do I do this? Right.
Hmm.
And it really came down to the first thing that I talk about when I lead people through the process, which is start small.
Yes.
And I know it sounds simple, and I know it sounds maybe even like it's too invaluable. Like it's not going to do anything much. Like small, we want
Mhm.
big, right? Everybody wants it big and huge and big swings and the masterpiece. Like I said, sit down in a session and come out and I've done the masterpiece and I'm bringing out and the clouds part and the light comes down, right? Like those moments. But that's lightning in a bottle, right? That doesn't happen often. What really happens is you show up every day and you do the work. And
Mhm.
so to start doing the work, you need to start small, because if you set yourself up with too many big expectations, you'll fail, and then you'll throw the whole process out and you'll walk away from it, because you'll be like, well, that didn't work, or I'm not wired to be able to do that, or that's okay for somebody else, but not for me. Like
Mm.
we say all these things to ourselves to kind of give ourselves an out. And I'm like, no, 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 time out. Start small. So for me, when I was in the height of my depression and I wanted to do this, I needed to start small. Small was like, okay, small time block, 10, 15 minutes a day. Somebody thinks, what can you possibly do that's going to be of any value in 10 or 15 minutes a day? Well, I can tell you that it might not be the thing that you produce in that 10 or 15-minute stretch, but what happens over the long haul, the
Mhm.
consistency that it builds in, the momentum that it brings, it will start to do some more things. You will see progress. You
Mhm.
will get through a lot of bad work before you get to the good work. And that's the stuff that needs to happen.
Mm.
Because I think too many times we think of our creativity in terms of, I should be able to sit down, do something brilliant, close the project out, and then ship it to the market or bring it out to the public or whatever I do with it, and it's going to be received and everything's going to be great. But there's so much more to a process than that. And I think when we think about it only in those terms, or we think about, I want to create, I need large blocks of time, so we wait for a weekend where there's nothing happening, which, by the way, never comes, right? Or we wait
Mm.
for, some other large block of time. And then
Mm.
what happens too, this was my experience, right? With art supplies, I needed to go find them. And so I'd be spending more than half my time that I'd set aside for creating something with setting up. with
Yes.
getting my stuff ready, with trying to think about what am I going to do.
Mm,
And then I'd sit there and I'd be like, I'm exhausted already and I haven't even started the creation process. And now I'm staring at a blank canvas and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I feel uninspired.
oh,
And then you're like, oh, well, I guess next time. And you pack it all up and you put it away. And then maybe months later, you try and flirt with it again.
mm,
And I'm like, there's a better way, right? Showing up every day in small increments at least gets you moving, at least gets you in the process. At least it starts to unlock some of those things so that things are more readily accessible and you don't have to do as much heavy lifting every time that you show up. And so that would be my advice is to start small, pick one project that you want to do, pick a time that you can do it. That's, again, maybe it's 10 or 15 minutes if that's all you can manage today. Steal part of a lunch hour, get up a little bit earlier, stay up a little bit later, figure out when that works with your energy and your schedule. At least do it.
yeah.
Try it. Don't just talk about it. Take action. That's my advice.
Absolutely. And that reminds me so much of my reading, actually. I would never have thought of doing it with something else. So thank you.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we don't value the small, we value the big. But I think when we start to identify, we have lots of small available, what can we do with it?
Absolutely.
Then things start to unlock.
And you slightly touched on inspiration there. So, how does someone advance their creative process when facing a lack of inspiration?
Yes. So that's the big one, right? Because a lot of people say, I'm waiting for the muse. I need to have inspiration strike, right? I need to make sure that I'm feeling inspired. And that's the thing that leads me to then take action to create. Because too many times we've maybe had experiences where we say we're going to show up to create, we show up and we're not feeling inspired, and then we go, this isn't working. So obviously I have something wrong. The problem with inspiration is that it needs to find you working. And if it comes and you're not able to do anything about it and you don't record something, it's gone. We've all had those moments where we're in the shower, we have these great ideas and we're like, oh my gosh, this is great, I got to do something. And then all of a sudden, like our mind goes somewhere else, or our schedule or whatever happens, and we're just rushed off to the next thing, and that thought is gone. Or we have this sense of, I need to figure out how to harness inspiration. And so my advice a lot of times is, it's like filling a well, right? Like trying to draw water from a well that doesn't have anything in it. That's what it's like when we're trying to show up to create and we're not inspired. And so I'm like, fill the well ahead of time. So that way, when you need inspiration, you actually have it available. So I talk a lot of times in terms of when I was in an advertising agency and we would do this thing called the swipe file. And the swipe file was literally, back then, right? This is like not a lot of computer use, right, as I was entering the workforce, but it was an actual file folder, and people would clip out things from magazines, right? Hey, I really like this font. I really like this color scheme. I really like this ad for whatever the concept is or whatever. And we would stuff it in these files for a later time. Because we saw something in the moment, we identified, hey, something about that is interesting or intriguing. I don't have a use for it right now, but I don't want to lose it. So I'm going to put it in this file so I can go back to it at a later time when I actually do need inspiration. And then I can start thumbing through the stuff and going, oh yeah, that's right. There's stuff for me here to look at. There's stuff for me here to remember that at one time this seemed interesting. Why? Is there a connection with this and what I have to do right now and the problem I have to solve? So setting yourself up in advance really helps. Collect things. Set a timer on your phone to be like, for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to, scroll through whatever. Maybe it's Pinterest. Maybe it's, whatever it is that's related to what you're creating. Scroll through some things and capture things.
Yeah.
Just because. Again, you may not even know how you're going to use it, when you're going to use it, why you're going to use it. It may not be used for 12 years, but at some point, you have the ability to go back and look at things that you've collected, curated, and also that you have organized, right? That's a big part of it too, because if you can't find something, it's no good in sticking it someplace and you're like, I know that I collected stuff along the way, but now I can't find it, which sometimes I'm very guilty of. But look in advance so that when you need it, it's there.
That's fantastic. Absolutely love that. And it is, yeah. Sometimes we just waste a lot of time just thinking about it. We need to get up and go and do it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Can you
Yeah.
talk us through a strategy to help our listeners who are struggling with time to create?
Yes. Because that's the other thing that people say, right? I don't have time. I don't have time to, if I can only find the time, that's another one. And I'm like, nobody finds time. Like, it's not like we're in a video game and all of a sudden, like, there's a hidden box, you jump up and it reveals, ring, 1 more hour unlocked for today. That doesn't happen. We all have the same amount of time, right? We all have, and so this theory and this notion of finding time, it's the myth. And really what we're saying is, I'm not prioritizing for this, which is a harder thing to say. And people don't want to say that. So I think we need to be really brutally honest with ourselves, first off, and say, if we're struggling with time for something, it's because of priorities. And that's not a good or a bad thing. It's a neutral thing, right? It's just, it is what it is. But if you say you want something to be more of a priority, then you will make sure that you make time for that. And one of the things that I tell people in the process of leading people through this, what I call daily creative habit, is schedule it. And I get pushback sometimes, especially from the creative people who like the muse, who like to be inspired and follow, like, whatever happens, like, don't put me in a box, don't tell me what to do. I want freedom, like the wind, to flow. And I'm like, cool, but set yourself up for success. Give yourself a container, and inside that container, do whatever you want to do. Be free. Go nuts. But you got to at least show up. And so if you're not showing up, it doesn't matter how much you want to be creative. It doesn't matter how much intention you have. And so I say schedule it. It sounds uncreative, but really at the end of the day, it's you saying, I'm making this a priority. And let's go back to the 15 minutes for a minute, right? If you say, I can only do 15 minutes a day, start now, look at your schedule, identify where is the 15-minute block that I can put on my calendar as if it was a really important doctor's appointment.
Yes.
And protect it. Protect it with a machete. Don't let anybody get to that. Because too often we think, I'll fit it in around the flow of whatever's happening. The problem is we don't end up doing anything. There is no margin. There's always something else to be done. There's always more responsibilities. There's always something else that will take our attention away from what we're saying is actually important to us. And so put it on your calendar. Make sure that you show up. Pick a time daily. Know your energy when it flows right so that you can set yourself up for success. If you don't believe me, at least try it. And most of the time people struggle with this to get this actually off the ground. It takes a little while.
Yeah.
But at least do something. Even if you say for the next 7 days and you put it on your calendar and you only hit maybe 3 of them, that's still 3 more times than you were doing previously. Build on that, right? Like, don't throw out the whole process because you didn't reach perfection. Go with what you do, build on it. Always know that there's more room for growth and more room for you to be able to expand your curiosity in it, your schedule in it, right? Build the time. If 15 minutes, all of a sudden you find that your schedule shifts and you have more time, great, then do more than that. But 15 minutes is not threatening. That's the point. So put that on your calendar, make sure you protect it and show up for that. Like, be ready.
When somebody wants to watch something on the television, they can make that time. Just take some of your television time away. The amount of people I know that watch religiously television every day is unbelievable. I hardly put the TV on for weeks sometimes. The creativity.
And yeah, I mean, and then it becomes the question of, is that just an excuse because I'm really afraid? Because I don't know what to do. And it's easier for me to just kind of hide in front of it. Now, I'm not against TV or movies or whatever. I actually enjoy a lot of things. But I would also say, think about the amount of time you spend as a consumer of that kind of creation of somebody else's stuff, as opposed to the amount of time you could be spending creating things of yourself and putting it out to the world and having your creations impact other people.
Wow, loving that. Loving that. So that nicely goes into my next question. How would you define successful creativity? Because some people say, oh, we're not good enough. They've tried it once. How do you know?
Yeah, it's funny. I think some of that depends on where you are in your journey, right? because I think there's an evolution that happens. If you had asked me that question when I was first coming back to my creativity, I would have defined success creatively as I'm doing what I set out to do. Like I said I was going to go show up at this time for my 15 minutes, and I did it. And I'm following curiosity, and that's what success looks like. Later on, it starts to look a little bit more like, well, success looks like me completing a project so that it matches the vision in my head, which sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't. And then sometimes people say, well, my goal is to make a living off my creativity. And so success for me is people paying me for my creativity. Whatever that looks like for someone. Sure, that could be part of it. But I think it's important to be really super specific in what creativity can look like for you, because if you leave it too open-ended, you can find yourself feeling really unfulfilled. Like you've done some things, you've made some progress, but there's still something that's at a deeper level of your motivation and what really lights you up when you create, your why, that's talked about a lot. And I think when you get in touch with that, that's what really starts to help you understand and frame things up. Like I said earlier, for me, it's not just about creating, it's also about connecting. And so my creation process doesn't feel complete until I'm connecting with somebody over what I've created. Knowing that about myself was extremely valuable because that helped me define what some success was like. Now, do I want people to buy my work or to pay me for my creativity? Absolutely. That's what I do. That's how I show up, right? Are there certain goals and metrics that I have? Of course. And because I have a business, right? Like we're not talking in terms of a hobby. I'm talking in terms of business at the moment. So there are things that you have to have in place for that to be, quote, successful. But I think success is something that can look different person to person. You can define success very different than I can. Somebody else is motivated by more, I want to make money and I want to have accolades and praise from my peers and those kind of things. There's nothing wrong with that stuff. It's just knowing that that's what that is so that you can be intentional about that, right? For me, again, I have to have that piece of connection, of relationship in the midst of what I do. And if that's void, then I don't feel successful. So that stuff only comes when you start to go inward and you reflect and you examine yourself and do a lot of the hard work inside, right? Journal and think and spend time with yourself, asking yourself questions.
Wow, that's brilliant. So what are some of the most common creative struggles people can deal with?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've touched on some of them as far as, time, certainly, and inspiration. I think another one is competition, right? Like people feeling like there are so many talented people in the world, and all I can do is see what they do and then see what I do and go like, man, I don't measure up. The work that I do I'm not as talented. I'm not as skilled. I'm not as, I don't have the opportunities that they have, or we go on and on and on. And the competition, the comparison, right, of that, it robs us of the ability to show up as ourselves because we're so busy looking outward at somebody else's journey, somebody else's creation, that we don't spend enough time with our own. And just like I had to figure out, oh, you know what? I like messy things. I like organic lines. I like bold colors, right? I like all of the stuff you see behind me on the wall here, right? Like it was a process to get there for me to understand that that's what that looks like for me, and for me to stop trying to emulate somebody else's style or content or whatever. I think it's natural and normal in the beginning to mimic, right? I think about bands, right? Like I used to play guitar a lot and was in a band as well. When you're first starting out, you're learning other people's songs. And you're learning how to play your instrument, and you're learning how to do these things first in your room by yourself, and then probably at some point out in public, right? Or even if it's just a group of friends, hey, play that song, And so you're playing that song and you're getting better at your skill, and you're learning how to do the what you've set out to do technically. But some people stop there. They don't ever go and say, I'm going to write my own songs and I'm going to take all those people that I love to listen to, my influences musically, and use it as ingredients. As opposed to, I want to emulate and copy what they're doing and how they're doing it. There's a huge difference. And I think when you grow as a creative person, you move past that place of copying and emulating. It's necessary. It's like training wheels in the beginning, but at some point you need to get rid of them so that you can find out what is it that you have to say? What is it that you want to do? And how? And so I think taking those influences, taking some of those things and saying, yeah, you can find pieces of that in my work, but I'm not trying to straight up copy somebody else's thing. Because everybody has influences. Everybody has people that they look to as inspiration. So that would be a big one to guard against that sense of comparison. And then the other part of that is the imposter syndrome that we get, which says, who am I to do this? Like, I don't know. People look at me and they're like, oh, that's so cool. You get to do this. You get to, create that, whatever. And then the voices inside your head say, but if they only knew. And, or like, I don't deserve this. Or the voices of the past of either parents or authority figures who spoke doubt, who spoke discouragement, and they mask themselves as our own voices inside our head that say, you can't do this. This is for everybody else, but not you. And so I think those are very real things that people struggle with. And even I think as far as imposter syndrome, that's not only at like a level of like just beginning, but I think that's something that happens every time you bump into something that's a new breakthrough point. You're trying new things. You're in a new project. You have new tools. You have a new idea, whatever it is that you're trying to do. And it's a place you haven't been before. And so naturally, the voices of doubt come. Naturally, the experience is one of, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if I'm going to be able to have this be a success for myself first, and then for other people when they're interacting what I create. Absolutely. So I think battling that sense of imposter and saying like, no, you know what? Like, this is more than right for me to do this. As a matter of fact, I need to do this because it's who I am, because I know who I am. And so starting from a place of identity and then battling that voice to say, you know what, imposter syndrome, be quiet. Like, I hear your arguments. I hear your thoughts, but no, you're dismissed.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and do this anyway, which takes practice and repeated over time.
Absolutely. So why is fun so important? I know we've got to enjoy what we're doing.
I think for me, fun was something that, well, first off, it's a core value of mine, right? Like, I remember as a kid, I mean, what kid doesn't like to have fun, right? Fun is something that comes naturally. You don't have to tell a kid, hey, go play, right? Like, that's what you're doing. That's the only thing, responsibility you have as a kid is to just go play, make fun, and imagination part of your world. And then we grow up, we take on a lot of responsibilities. There's a lot of practicality. There's a lot of heaviness that comes with things. And before you know it, we can find that fun is in the rearview mirror. Fun is something that we've decided happens when we retire or on a long weekend. And it's sad because I know too many people who still are in that mentality, that mindset of, I'm going to defer my fun for another day because right now I have to work. I have bills, I have things, whatever. And that's not taking anything against or away from those things. But what I was saying in writing this book, and because first and foremost, it was to myself, it was, where did the fun go? And how can I get it back? And even in creativity, there's a lot of things you have to do that aren't necessarily fun. And so examining that for myself first, and then offering people some insights. And so, but this idea of the deferred fun, I said, I think there's a better way. I think, what if we, instead of saying fun is at the end of the process, that's the reward at the end, what if fun was actually part of the process, and fun was introduced every day in some way by ourselves, because no one's going to be, the fun police, right? They're not going to come by and say, hey, you didn't have your fun today.
Exactly.
It's a mindset first. It's looking for, it's being open for this and saying, there are things that I do in my day that I know are not going to be pleasurable. I'm not going to enjoy them, right? This is going to suck. I have to do my taxes today. I have to do work with spreadsheets. I hate spreadsheets, whatever it is, right? And what happens is we automatically front load our experience with this is going to be terrible. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because we were thinking, I don't like this. This is going to be terrible. Then we start doing it and we say, see, it's terrible. I was right. And then we're just grumpy and no one wants to be around us. And we're like, ugh, and sighing loudly and just, like all that. And I'm like, what if instead of that and having a bad day because of that, just whole complaining and everything that comes along with it, what if we said, okay, how can I introduce fun into this? And you might be like, well, I still have to do my task. I can't not do it. I'm like, no, I'm not telling you not to do it. But what I'm telling you is find a way to introduce fun. So maybe for you, you really enjoy music and you create a playlist that is all filled with fun music that makes you kind of like move around a little bit, even in your seat. And you're just kind of like, it lifts your mood because it's affecting you, right? Put that on as you're doing that task that you don't really want to do. So you start introducing a fun element. You start introducing something that is positive to overlay and kind of squash your already negative experience as you're heading into this. So it's a choice. Sometimes fun happens and it's spontaneous, but there are times, mostly, when we have to choose to have some fun. And that starts with, again, being curious. It starts with being open. It starts with asking yourself the question, what if this was fun? What would this look like? And I think the thing that this really goes back to is the larger question of what does fun look like for me, right? Just like we were talking about success, the same thing. You might consider something fun and I might be like, that doesn't sound fun at all. You might like to jump out of planes. And I'm like, have at it, because I'm not going anywhere near that, right? That's not fun. That sounds terrifying. But that's not the point, is not to make comparisons of what fun looks like for each other. It's really more to go, this is what fun looks like for me. And if I know what fun looks like, how can I intentionally start to introduce some of those things into my day every single day, even if it's little pieces? Another example that I gave in the book was to take the long way home. So often we're about efficiency, right? We're about, cramming as much into our schedule as we can. And so point A to point B as fast as we can. And I'm like, what if you one day said, I'm going to leave a little extra time and I'm going to take some roads that I don't normally go down because I don't, quote, have a reason. And today my reason is to explore, to have fun. And so you go down some different roads and all of a sudden you discover some things that maybe you didn't know were there, or you learn some things about your own neighborhood or places, or you're like, wow. Like the story I share in my book is I did that. I decided one day to take the long way home. And what happened is I happened upon this park that was in my neighborhood that I didn't even know was there because I didn't have a reason to go down that road. I didn't have a reason to go explore, whatever. And when I found this park, I got out and I walked around and I was like, this is beautiful. This is amazing. And then I thought to myself, I would never have known this was here my entire life because I just didn't allow myself to go down those paths. And so being curious, opening up to different pathways, literally helped me discover this place. And then I said, you know what? Now that I know this is here, I can go back when I want to on purpose. Like when I feel like I want to go for a walk, enjoy nature. I know now a new place that I can go. And that wouldn't have happened if I had just been all about the efficiency of getting from point A to point B. It's introducing some fun into it so that you can actually have a better experience and a better life and not wait and not defer for another day, because so many times another day doesn't come, or people retire and they don't get to do the things that they said that they really wanted to do. And it's tragic.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if that's for you, get Mike's book, Make Fun a Habit. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
So what is a simple action someone can take to have more fun in their day? I know you've given us some tips there.
Again, I think really it goes back to being curious, right? And identifying what your fun is, what that looks like. Belief is a big part of it, right? Believing that it's possible, believing that you can have a different experience than what you're currently having, regardless of what your circumstances may be telling you. And again, I don't say that to minimize anybody's circumstances, because I know there are people dealing with a lot of heavy things and a lot of painful things. But I would still say we need fun. Absolutely. Because fun brings levity. Fun brings a place of relief. Fun brings a place of enjoyment. And a life void of fun is just very dark and very bleak. And so identify small ways, right? Like we're talking about, go down a different road, listen to some music, doodle, right?
Yes.
Draw, do some things that are just for you in the midst of this, like practice some self-care in the midst of fun, because really self-care, enjoyment, right? Like that's linked together. If you like to play golf, great, then go play golf, make it a priority, figure out the rhythm as you go, as far as how you can make this happen. And I think, again, going back to like the starting small thing, for fun, don't think expensive, don't think extravagant. I mean, sure, it could be,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
maybe, at some point, hopefully it is those things, but don't let that be the reason why you don't do it. And saying, well, I don't have a large block of time, I don't have a lot of money, I don't have, whatever it is that you think you need, because you could simply have fun by going to maybe a local bookstore that has a coffee shop attached to it, and go sit and read and drink your favorite beverage for, half hour. And that's fun. And somebody might be like, that doesn't sound like fun. Like, great, then don't do that. Do what sounds fun to you. Again, it's contextualizing it. It's knowing yourself. It's knowing what fun looks like and doing it with intention and purpose. And so start small. You can always build, invite friends into it, have fun together with things. And I think it's really, again, about priority. And when we can have that sense of fun and not only what we're doing, maybe in our work, in our personal life, but we're having those experiences, it's then living a life that's worth living, right? It's having a fuller, richer experience in life. And I don't know anybody who doesn't want that, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. How is fun useful in a business setting?
That's what I get sometimes. People going like, work is work, it's not supposed to be fun, right? And in the title of my book, I say, it's a creative playbook for making, life and work fun again. So I am talking about making work fun. And what I'm not saying is shirk your responsibilities, right? I'm not saying don't do the things you're supposed to do by any means, or take advantage of your employer or whatever. But what I am saying is, what if you looked at what you do and tried to find the fun in it? And maybe that's some friendly competition with your coworkers on something. Maybe it's an office dance party every Friday, right? Where you have a 10-minute thing where you're like, okay, let's all do something silly. Maybe a lot of people think it's, well, you're talking about pizza parties and throwing confetti and stuff like that. That's no place in the work, And I'm like, maybe, but maybe not, because we're not talking about a one and done. We're not talking about punching in, checking a list and going, okay, well, we did the pizza party. Great. We're done for a month. Really what I'm talking about is creating a culture that is fun, that is open. And I don't know any employer who would not want employees more engaged,
Absolutely,
as opposed to just clocking in and clocking out. I don't know an employee who wouldn't want their employees thinking about things on a deeper level, where they're starting to follow curiosity, be more creative, have innovative ideas that affect products or services and the bottom line, because you have more buy-in from somebody, because they're enjoying what they're doing. They're having fun in the midst of it. Too often, I think we lead with a heavy-handed sense of, here are the tasks, here's what we need to do, here's our crushing deadlines, go make this happen. And what I'm saying is, if we can find a way to actually have enjoyment in the midst of that, in meeting our goals and our objectives, we might actually find that there are better ways of doing things. There are more innovative products that start coming about because our people are having fun. We may find that there's a better way of doing something that ends up being more efficient or effective, and not simply just do this. And when we ask, why are we doing this? And people say, well, it's just the way we've always done it.
absolutely.
And that's a lack of vision. That's a lack of creativity. And when you allow people to have fun, you're allowing them to follow the curiosity, to have the creativity, to ask those questions, and to come up with results and come up with solutions that just might change not only your business, but an industry. And I think that's what people want. They want impact. They want to know that they're successful in the businesses, and that the businesses are doing things to, yes, make money, but also do something for the greater good, hopefully. And that's where you get that, is when people are invested, and when they're engaged, and when they're having fun in the midst of things. having a challenge to engage with can be fun. It doesn't necessarily always mean like, again, throwing confetti and, having a kazoo, we're not talking zany, we're talking enjoyment. And so asking those questions, I think, is the first part of how can we make this more fun?
Absolutely. Mike, you've given us a lot of resources, daily tips, steps. What would you say is your biggest takeaway on creating daily creative habits?
Yeah. So I would say go back to start small, take action, right? Be specific. Here's what I want to do. Here's a little goal. Here's a little project. Here's something I want to work on, the context, and then take action. Don't talk about it a lot, journal a lot about it, and kind of convince yourself. Just act, because action cures so much. Action brings clarity. So many times we want the clarity and then to act, but really what happens is the clarity comes in the midst of acting. And so if you really want that clarity, you really want that vision, you really want that sense of motivation and drive, and to engage with that part of you again, or maybe for the first time, take action. You will start to see some things go. And again, you can always change, and you will change as it evolves and as you evolve. But it's at least showing up and being an active participant in your own life.
And I like that, the key word, in your own life.
Exactly.
So where can the listeners find you online, your books? What's your website, Mike?
Yeah, the easiest place is my website, which is mikebrennan.me, M-E. And from there, you can find all the resources that I have, including the books. And I also have links out to my own work. That's the illustration work, design work, and many of the other things that we didn't even have time to talk about today. But the multi-creative person that I am, you can find it all there at mikebrennan.me. And of course, I love connecting with people. So be sure to say hi and that you heard me here.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
If you're listening to this and you're feeling something inside, listen to that prompt. Don't ignore it, because I think too many people stifle it, or they'll think, I'll deal with this another day. But if you're feeling something inside kind of bubbling up, pay attention to that, because that's important. And again, take action.
Thank you so much for sharing your insightful wisdom and knowledge with us today. And by doing so, you have helped so many others make a difference. I'd really like to acknowledge you for that, Mike Brennan.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. We are all about Create the Courage to Be Fearless podcast here. So what is your definition of courage?
I think my definition of courage would be do it anyway, because so many people think to be courageous, to be fearless, it's, this lack of fear. It's this sense of bravery that just all of a sudden overcomes you. And I much like the action brings clarity, I think in this case, being courageous, acting, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it, is really what courageous is all about. It's moving forward in spite of the objections you may have internally, externally, and harnessing the power, the willpower, the drive, and taking action.